I'm pleased to be here with Gina and Owen, CMO of BP Collins, who she'll explain more about in a minute. And what we'd like to do is just talk to you about CSR and what it means to BP Collins. But before that, Gina, quick intro to BP Collins and what you do.
Quick intro to us. Well, we are a law firm. We have a head office in Gerrards Cross, offices in Tame and London, and have been in existence for 57 years. Very invested in our communities that we work in. We don't see ourselves as just a law firm. We see ourselves as part of our communities. It's really important that we invest back in those communities and support those communities as those communities support us. So there's a real ethos in the business. In terms of the law that we undertake, we support businesses, we support families, and a full range of activities and legal support that they might need, whether it's in their business or whether it's as an individual.
Okay. So EWO are a specialist comms and marketing business consultancy, but over the last decade probably we've specialised more and more in CSR and CSR related activity, and I guess that's why I was really intrigued to talk to you. We've obviously known each other for, you might say, far too long, but I've been very aware and I guess not involved in, but spoken to you many times about all of the CSR work that BP Collins have done. But before we get into that specifically, CSR and ESG, there's a huge amount of terminology being used at the moment, and for many people, they still don't know. If you say CSR, a lot of business people don't know what that is, let alone ESG. But there are some very specific differences. What's, in your view, the differences?
For me, I think when we started to look at CSR, the conversation was about CSR. It wasn't about ESG at all. And for us, we very much focused on our corporate social responsibility, those three aspects. But within that, we had our environmental aspects, our people, our philanthropy, etc. Now, I think we're starting to look at ESG as part of that. And I see CSR as what we do, but the ESG element is how we measure what we do. It's not just about doing it, it's how, and
it's about the reporting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's I quite often think of it as it's the tip of the iceberg. It's what investors will want to see. It's what the city wants to see from business. It's, as you say, it's the measurability. This is what we do.
When we started out and we did our first CSR accreditation, and that's now 5 years ago. It was almost amazing to us, as much as anybody else, to draw together all of the things that we did and say, oh, actually, here it is in one package. That's great. And then we start to think about what can we do next. Whereas now, as we start to look at the environmental impact, and I think we only have to look at the news for a broad acceptance to understand that there's environmental impact, and we start to work towards carbon neutral, then you start to think about, okay, how are we measuring that? And that, to me, how are we measuring that? What do we need to measure? What else should we be measuring and demonstrating? It's not just about this is what we're doing. It actually is that having a measurable impact. And if it's not, then what should we be doing instead? And so I think the two things, start to merge in that perspective.
Yeah, and I totally agree. For me, CSR, the tip of it, using the iceberg analogy, CSR is the framework that a business should have in place that covers all of the four pillars. So the environment, the community, the philanthropy, but also one element that a lot of people forget is the workplace and the support and staff that you give to your staff. And if that framework's in place, to me, it would then trigger a business doing that annual reporting, producing social impact reports. And if you're doing that on an annual basis anyway, the ESG element, which is the reporting that everybody wants to see, is automatically achieved.
Yeah.
I think what we'll see more and more of now is legislation coming into place.
Yeah.
Europe's there.
Yeah.
Come January with CSRD, and a lot of people are saying, oh, but we're not that big.
Yeah.
But if you're in the supply chain, under Scope 3 rules, you're going to have to provide that information at some point.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, because when I look at what we do here, having a framework that exists and measures that you should be looking at enables us not to reinvent the wheel, in a sense, and sort of sit in our imagination thinking, oh, it would be great to do this, but actually there's no measurable impact or demonstrable impact on that for doing that. So I think, having ESG as a framework is really good for supporting CSR initiatives.
Yeah.
So is how I tend to look at it.
So you said earlier on that BP Collins are not just a law firm, you're a part of the community. Explain a bit more then why you decided to go down putting a CSR strategy in place and evolving that over the 5, 6, 7 years that you've been doing.
Yeah. Well, for us as a business, we've always done sort of various sort of activities. We've always had initiatives around our staff, which would be led by our HR team, initiatives around our buildings and doing the right things, which is led by our facilities team, initiatives around our community, which is led by the marketing team. And so the CSR allowed us to sort of draw all those things together and start to look at what we're doing, as opposed to in silos, actually holistically.
Yeah.
And then almost like an assessment in itself, see, well, where are there pieces missing in the puzzle, and how do we then develop that to have a truly holistic approach. And areas that we looked at were things like local supply chains. Are we doing enough of that? Can we do more? And what's the impact of that, A, for supporting local businesses, but also reducing our carbon footprint. So we started to look at things, because we're now talking to each other about the initiatives that we're doing, not just to support the business, but actually in a broader context. So I think the CSR, sort of looking at CSR and the CSR accreditation enabled us to do that and bring it together.
Okay.
And it was probably only when I had an initial conversation with, Richard at CSRA, and somebody says, well, you're doing lots of things, but you're not sort of drawing that together, that I really started to think, that's an excellent point. And here's a whole initiative that can help us draw that together and help us make improvements and make sure we're doing the right things in the right areas and actually assess what we do.
As a marketeer, I obviously see there are huge opportunities, and personally my involvement in CSR, my passion for it was born probably 25 years ago out of marketing and realising that this was a nice soft way we could sell the business or promote the business. So how do you think it's benefited the firm as a whole, its people, the way the firm's operated, but also more importantly, from a marketing, how's it integrated with marketing?
There's a huge, I'd like to, I think there are some businesses where they may take a completely commercial approach to something like CSR accreditation or anything else they do. We do have a commercial approach to it. There are commercial benefits, and certainly being able to understand those commercial benefits are really good when it comes to your board reporting, etc. We're pushing an open door here in that regard. There are times where a decision would be made that isn't maybe the cheapest decision, but is the correct CSR decision. And so we will sort of weigh those things up. As long as it's not hugely detrimental to the business, that's something we should be doing. So there's the commercial impact And we certainly do look at that. What's the commercial benefit? If we can support a local business and we're not paying huge transport costs, there's commercial benefit to that. From a PR perspective, it retains our talent, it attracts new talent, and that's hugely important. And again, the commercial knock-on for something like that is that it then reduces our recruitment fees, for example.
Yeah.
For our clients, we get more client investment because they see what we're doing with the community. They see that investment within the community. That, engenders more loyalty, a better perception of the business, and a positive perception of the business, more likely to get a recommendation for somebody to come to us because we're seen as a responsible and community-focused business. So there are commercial benefits.
And do you think
it's wrong to say, it's altruistic, because you have to balance the two things.
Absolutely. I was going to ask to say, do you think more and more client businesses are looking for socially responsible suppliers nowadays? Yeah.
I wouldn't say at the moment it's a huge percentage, but it certainly is a percentage.
Yeah.
I think there's two sides. On an individual basis, people like the association with a business that's doing good things.
Yeah.
From a commercial, and a business perspective, a commercial business perspective, yes, it is coming into the supply chains. And we've certainly got clients where, as their suppliers, we're asked to complete sort of forms to say what we're doing and how we're demonstrating that and what we're measuring, and actually asking us to report back on some of the initiatives that we're doing. And I think that's only going to become more and more common.
No, I'd agree. And I think the city is driving that. So the investment firms are going, for the larger corporates are going, okay, now you've got to do it. And that's just going to, it takes time and it's going to trickle down. Personally, I'd like to see the government doing more. I'd like to see legislation in place now. It will come, but it feels a bit like it's pulling teeth. But I think if we're doing one of these in 5 years' time, I think we'll be looking back going, that was the milestone. I think the next 5 years is going to be a huge, huge shift.
Yeah.
So I guess just to finish off, what I'm always intrigued about is what are the real benefits to the staff here? How have you seen the staff react over the last 5 years since BP Collins has started this?
Really positively, and it's really interesting. I've done an induction for new joiners this morning, and one of the things that came up there was that attracted people to come to the firm. It encouraged them to take the interview, and when they came here, they felt that it related to them. What we were doing was a value that was important to them, and outside of that, the initiatives for the staff, we have mental health first aiders as part, we might have done that anyway, but actually it all sits under that CSR heading now. And then we look at what are the other things we need to do. So there's, it's really helped us improve and focus on our development programs, our frameworks, our support mechanisms, looking holistically at what we do for our staff, as well as attracting and being beneficial and reflecting the values of the staff themselves and the new talent that comes to the firm. So it's many sides of the coin.
Yeah. And do you think, I guess just do you think the younger generation, and you and I are of a different age group to a lot of people, but certainly our children who are in their sort of 20s and just stepping out into the career, do you think they're now demanding it of businesses?
I don't know if there's a demand, because I think for younger people that there's a balance of they want a job and that's a tough marketplace. However, I think what it does is it makes them gravitate towards the businesses that reflect their belief systems. They do want businesses to have a bigger purpose other than just profit making.
Right.
Because they see that they are businesses that will invest in them as an individual and their career and support them in their career and their development. as well as considering their environmental impact, you know, because if you can gravitate towards a business that's going to help you in the things that are important to you, whether that's your career development, whether that's supporting community initiatives, whether that's reducing environmental impact, why wouldn't you do that over a business that doesn't care,
purely commercial,
is going to pollute the environment, etc. So I think for young people, there's certainly a pull towards businesses from multi sort of, I think, dimensions.
Okay.
Yeah, would be my take on it. Ask a young person; they may say something completely different.
Well, yeah, no, I think I agree with you in that it is at the moment that it's not a demand, but it's a consideration.
Yes.
When you're making a decision on either your first job or a move, I think more and more of that generation are saying, well, okay, if I've got a tick box, a tick sheet, that's got to be one that the box has got to be ticked.
Yeah.
From my personal support, but also I want to know they're looking after the community.
Yeah.
And for me, the community is not just the internal community, not just the community in your local town or city, but it's the global community as well. And I, from what I see, I think more and more of that generation are starting to go, hold on, we have to do that.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, it means you become more attractive to new starters or potential starters, and I guess the chances are you're going to retain those staff in the longer term. If they're happier, yes, money will always be an issue. The chance of career development will always be an issue. But if they've got an environment where they have a purpose, I think is... Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to work for a business like that?
Absolutely.
Is my question.
Yeah. Well, I have worked for both, and I know what my answer would be. So, Gina, thank you very much.
You're very